Well, looks like our partnership's off to a fantastic start.
It's obvious that Dante Reyes and Ames will return in Fast X Part 2, and seeing as the 11th movie will be the last in the mainline franchise, Louis Leterrier and Vin Diesel could take this opportunity to bring back more antagonists for one last outing. Join ScreenRant as we break down which villains, other than Dante, could return for the last Fast Saga movie.
I'll see you soon. You think he gonna get out?
He'll be out.
Carter Veron was the Argentinian drug lord that Brian O'Connor and Roman Pierce took down in Too Fast, Too Furious. In the first Fast Saga sequel, Brian and Roman cleared their respective rap sheets by delivering Veron's dirty money to the authorities. And in the end, Veron was arrested, but not without promising to return. In fact, he was the only Fast and Furious villain to actually promise to come back and exact his revenge. And in Fast X Part 2, Veron might just get his chance. Right now, the former crime lord is probably still rotting in a prison cell, but given his previous connections to the underworld, it's unlikely that Veron has retired from his life of crime. More importantly, Veron might be the final ingredient in Dante's lethal recipe for Dom's crew, especially if Veron and Brian both return in Fast X Part 2. Brian could potentially save Dom and Little B, and his presence alone could give the crew a better chance of survival. But Dante could respond to this by bringing back the man with a score to settle with both Brian and Roman. Moreover, as arguably the most realistic sinister villain in Fast and Furious, Veron could prove to be the perfect foil for Dante, who is basically the franchise's version of the Joker. Veron was also played by Cole Hauser, whose Yellowstone fame and fan base could be the keys to Fast X Part 2, reclaiming box office glory for the franchise. And the same can be said of this next character.
You're not the man on them. I am way better. I'm the future of mankind.
Played by the inimitable Idris Elba, Brixton Lore was the cybernetically enhanced super soldier and villain of Hobbs and Shaw. Brixton and Deckard Shaw were both MI6 agents, until Brixton was recruited by the genocidal organization Eaton, who forced Brixton to recruit Shaw as well. After Shaw refused, he was forced to put a bullet in Brixton's head, which was the first time he died. In the ending of Hobbs and Shaw, the titular protagonists worked together to take down Brixton, after which he was shut down by the anonymous boss of Eaton. With his kill switch having been triggered, Brixton fell into a nearby rapids and presumably died a second time. But since Brixton has survived worse, nothing's stopping Dante from just bringing him back again, but also recruiting Brixton against Dom's crew. After all, resurrections are fairly common in the Fast and Furious franchise. There is also no doubt that Brixton will jump at the chance to kill either Hobbs or Shaw. That said, if anyone has the technical expertise to bring back a cyborg like Brixton, it would be Cypher. After Cypher joined Dom's crew in Fast X, she may just try to turn Brixton into another villain turned hero in Fast X Part 2. Indeed, Brixton's second death could be finally what convinces him to seek a different path. One that might just lead to redemption, and not just more senseless deaths. With the action-driven franchise coming to an end, it may just be the right time to bring back the only villain with an actual sci-fi backstory, and abilities that no other antagonist can offer. On the other hand, instead of a straight-up bad guy, Fast X Part 2 may be in need of a more complex anti-hero.
Every man has to have a code. Mine? Precision.
Another one of the many former villains in the Fast and Furious franchise, Owen is Deckard Shaw's brother and Queenie's son. Alongside the Shaws, Owen functions mostly as an antagonist until the Fate of the Furious, in which Owen helps in saving Dom's son from Cypher. When audiences last saw Owen, he was on the plane from where Cypher escaped in the Fate of the Furious, and 2 movies later he hasn't appeared on screen. It's a pity, because he's not just a great character, but he was also played by fan favorite actor Luke Evans. Fast X Part 2 could finally explain what happened to Owen by reuniting him with his family. But what's even more interesting is how Owen could viably fall back into a villain role. After all, although Owen eventually helped Dom's crew, his backstory gives him more in common with the franchise's villains than its heroes. Unlike Dom and Deckard, Owen notably treated his own crew as expendable. He was first and foremost a mercenary. Given the right right incentives, it's possible that Dante Reyes could recruit Owen into his revenge plan, maybe even by taking Deckard and Queenie hostage. If Dante can somehow turn one of Dom's allies into another villain, this could perfectly illustrate how dangerous Dante can truly be. The only villain to turn family against family. The final death of Owen Shaw may also serve as the balanced tragedy that makes the finale memorable without things getting too dark. Then again, maybe it's better to bring back a villain that can drag Fast X Part 2 back to the franchise's street racing roots. And this brings us to our next antagonist.
Stay away from him, or the only thing you'll be driving is a wheelchair.
Also known as the Drift King, Tekashi was the greatest drift racer in all of Japan, earning the title of Drift King prior to the events of the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. But everything changed when the American Sean Boswell slid into the Tokyo racing underworld. In the end of Tokyo Drift, Tekashi didn't just lose the title of Drift King to Sean, who beat Tekashi in the final race. Tekashi also lost the right to even remain in Tokyo, which was part of the deal during his last race with Sean. And this was the last time that the Tokyo Drift villain was seen on screen. With Tekashi coming from a family deeply involved in the Yakuza, his loss also comes at the cost of his family's honor, which he likely would have needed to reclaim following the events of Tokyo Drift. Unfortunately, the succeeding 8 films in the mainline franchise never returned to Tekashi's story, and this could finally change in Fast X Part 2, as Dom's crew continues the fight against the greatest villain they've ever faced in Dante. This could prompt the return of allies like Sean, and Sean's last outing wouldn't be complete without at least a rematch from the original Drift King. Moreover, Tekashi and Han still have unfinished business, which Tekashi may still want to settle after finding out that Han is still alive. On that note, Tekashi could also potentially become another former villain in Fast X Part 2, depending on how Han reacts to his return. Alongside Han and the possible comeback of Sean, Tekashi could make drifting cool again, whether he ends up being a villain or a hero. As an added bonus, as Tekashi is played by Brian T, his return would mean that there are 2 Reacher stars in the last Fast Saga movie, the other being Alan Ritchson, who plays Ames. However, maybe Fast X Part 2 needs to take a different direction than its predecessors. Rather than bringing back villains or adapting them into Dom's crew, the best move could be simply expanding Dante Reyes' story.
We're suffering Isolde. Never accept death as payment.
We're not saying that Fast X Part 2 could somehow resurrect Hernan, whose death back in Fast 5 served as the catalyst for the last main arc in the Fast Saga. However, at this point in the story, Hernan could return in flashbacks about him and Dante's life. And this could fix the only problem with the character of Dante Reyes, that he's too one-dimensional. By showing flashbacks to Dante's life featuring his father Hernan, Fast X Part 2 could fill in the gaps in Dante's relentless quest for revenge. As Dante himself has explained, Hernan wasn't a very good father, so he's only seeking revenge out of pride and a sense of duty. Alongside playing out Dante's revenge plan against Luke Hobbs, his father's killer, Fast X Part 2 could dig a little deeper by bringing back Hernan on screen. After all, it is Hernan who raised the greatest villain in the Fast and Furious franchise, which frankly wasted the presence of actor Joaquin de Almeida in his limited role as the crime lord. Just as the flashbacks to Fast 5 helped complete the story in Fast X, this second part could look back at Dante's life and examine why he and his father were so close. While Dante is irredeemably evil, such flashbacks could make him strangely relatable and even more charismatic, giving more weight to his inevitable defeat in the final film. As the Fast Saga finally reaches the finish line, it's only right that Fast X Part 2 pay due tribute to the man who created its best and last villain. Which other antagonists do you think should reprise their roles in the 11th Fast film? Thanks for watching Screen Rant, and stay tuned for more movie news.